So tribals, Dikus and the vision of a golden age is our new topic that we are going to cover today. So this is from the chapter of history of class 8. So let us go through the chapter. So introduction, the chapter explores the life of tribal communities in India, how they lived, how they were affected by the British colonial rule and how some of them resisted through revolts. It also explains their vision of an ideal world or a golden age free from exploitation. So basically the chapter is about the tribal peoples and the communities and how they were affected by the British rules and how some of them resistance, that is about the tribal revolts, and their vision was about the golden age that is free from exploitation. So this is the chapter. That's why it is named as Tribals, Dikus and the Vision of a Golden Age. Now who were the tribals? Tribals were the indigenous communities living in forest, hills and isolated regions. Okay, so these are the people. They live in forest and they are isolated. Okay, they had their own cultures, customs and ways of life, often different from the mainstream population. So the mainstream population, those who are living in the villages and the towns, whatever their cultures and customs are there, but these tribal people have their own cultures and customs and they often are different from these peoples, okay, from the people of the village and the towns. They dependent on hunting, gathering, shifting agriculture and herding for their livelihood. So their way of earning is also different. They depend on hunting, gathering, shifting agricultures and herding for their livelihood. Basically they depend on the forest, okay, for living also. So these are the tribal people who live in forest, hills and isolated region. Now what were their ways of life, how they were living? So they used to do shifting cultivation, that is practice in forested areas. Land was cleared by burning trees, also called jhum cultivation. Okay, so shifting cultivation was just popular among the tribal community. Here they clear the land by burning trees and do the cultivation. Crops were grown for a few years, then left to recover. So few years they used to grow the crops, and after that they left the land so that the land may recover the nutrients. Okay. So this is one of the way they live their life. Secondly, they used to do hunting and gathering. Tribals collected forest produce, that is the roots, fruits, honey, and hunted animals for food. Forests were essential for survival. So hunting and gathering is also one of their way of living. So in this way, these forests were essential for survival of the tribal communities. Next is animal herding, that is pastoralism. Here some tribal groups were nomadics and rear cattle, sheep and goats. They move seasonally for grazing also. So animal herding is also common among the tribal peoples. Some group of tribals, they were nomads. They just move from one place to another and rear the cattle for their living. And they move seasonally for grazing also. Okay. Next some of them also do settle cultivation. Some tribes began to settle and farm. They grew crops regularly like other farmers, and among them some groups were also seen, they were settled in a particular area and do the farming. Okay, so in this way the people used to live their life. They used to do shifting cultivation, hunting and gathering, then animals herding and settle cultivation. Now as we proceed to the chapter, we heard the term also Dikus. Now who were the Dikus? Dikus were the outsiders, non-tribals, it means they were not tribal people, such as British officials, moneylenders, landlords and Christian missionaries. Tribals often saw them as exploiters who disrupted their lives. So these Dikus they just disturb the life of the people, these tribal people. So tribal people don't like them. Now, how does British affect tribal life? So when the colonial rule was there in India, it affected the British also. They made some rules and regulation for the tribal communities also. And it affect tribal lives. So how? Let us see. So British introduced some forest laws. British declare forest as state property. It means now the property belong to them. Tribals could no longer freely use forest resources. It led to loss of livelihood and displacement. Now, since the forest law has been declared, these forests were under the property of the British and tribal could not use it freely. The resources, whatever they are using, they could not able to use that one freely. And in this way, what happened? They led to loss of livelihood and displacement also. They have to move from one place to another also. Land ownership changes. Traditional tribal land systems were disrupted. Lands was taken by the landlord or the moneylenders, and tribal often lost their land due to theft. Now what happened? These tribal people, their land ownership also changes. They have their own land. Traditional land was there. And now what happened? They used to take some money also from the moneylender, and now moneylender are and landlord are just occupying that land. So in this way, the traditional tribal land system was disrupted. Okay, so here land ownership changes we have seen. Then taxation was also implemented on tribal peoples. So tribals had to pay taxes which they never had to do before. Those who could not pay lost their land or were forced into bonded labor. Now, if they are using the forest product or the resources, or if their cattle are grazing there in the forest also, they have to pay the taxes, so which they have never done before. And in this way, they could just lose their land also, or where they were forced into bonded labor also, right? Then labor and plantation work. Tribals were recruited often forcefully for tea plantation or road building under tough conditions. So what happened? Laborers were forced, these tribal peoples were forced to work for tree plantation and sometimes in road building work also under tough conditions. It means they were not taken care by the Britishers, and the people were not happy. Okay, the labor and plantation work, due to this the tribal community were not happy. So in this way, the British affect the tribal lives by introducing forest laws. Then the land ownership changes, taxation was introduced, and they have been forced labor and plantation work. Now, in return for this, tribal revolt and resistance. Now, major tribal revolt is the Santhal rebellion, that is 1855 to 1856. Santhals, that is a tribe, that is a tribal community, were angry at land laws, high taxes and exploitation by the Dikus. It led a powerful uprising against the British, suppressed by British. However, this movement, the Santhal rebellion, were suppressed by the British forces. Okay, they raised their voice, but it has been suppressed by the British forces. Now here we will came to know about the Birsa Munda and the vision of golden age. So Birsa Munda was a tribal leader from the Munda tribe, Jharkhand. He was also a tribal. He was born in mid 1870s, that is in 1875, and he became a symbol of resistance. He led a movement against the British rule and the missionaries. What was his message? He wanted to establish a golden age, Satyug, a time when tribals had land, dignity and freedom. So since now the tribal has lost all these things, he wanted to establish that golden age, the Satyug, so that a tribal could have their own land, they have their dignity and they have their freedom also. So he also opposed Dikus, who were destroying tribal culture and life. He urged tribals to follow their traditional ways and worship their own god, that is Singhonga. And his movement is called the Ulguland, that is the Great Tumulent. Okay, so this was his message from the Birsa Munda. Now let us see what was the British reaction. As the movement spread, the British officials decided to act. They arrested Birsa in 1895 and convicted him on charges of rioting and jailed him for 2 years. So they arrested the Birsa Munda and just put them in jail for 2 years. Just charge him of rioting and jail him for 2 years. So Birsa Munda was released in 1897. In 1900, he was died of cholera and the movement faded away. So he was released even though in 1897, but was died in 1900 due to cholera. His revolt left a lasting legacy of tribal pride and resistance. So the British colonial rule destroyed the self-sufficient forest-based economy of tribals, took away their land, changed their culture and pushed them into poverty and struggle. Christian missionaries entered tribal areas to convert people to Christianity. They tried to change their tribal customs, religion, and social life. This also led to the identity crisis and tension within the tribal communities. Now, tribal movements were a voice against injustice, and these movements show early resistance to colonialism, protected tribal rights, and contributed to India's larger fight for justice and independence. This British tribal movement, however, further just help in the fight for the justice and independence, that is the rise of nationalism, and they also help in fighting against the Britishers. Tribal leaders like the Birsa Munda, Sidhu Kanu and others united people from different villages and tribes. So it created a sense of solidarity and shared purpose. It helped tribal understand their collective strength. Okay. So this is about the topic, that is the tribals, Dikus and the visions of golden age. Here how Birsa Munda explained the vision of an ideal world, that is the golden age. We just came to know about this one. Then the tribals were the indigenous community and how British affected them. So this is the whole chapter. Okay. So thank you for watching until the end. I hope this chapter has been clear to you. So this much for this video.